My husband's family called me a kept woman at their exclusive investment dinner, whispering that I was nothing more than a pretty decoration who contributed nothing of value to their prestigious financial empire. What they did not know was that I owned Metropolitan Trust Bank, the institution that held mortgages on every single property they considered their crowning achievements. By the time dessert was served, their condescending smirks would transform into expressions of shock and humiliation that would forever alter the dynamics of our family relationships. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Victoria Ashford adjusted the delicate pearl bracelet on her wrist as she sat in the passenger seat of her husband's Mercedes, watching the familiar landscape of Beacon Hill's prestigious financial district pass by the window. The October evening carried the crisp promise of New England autumn, and the golden light filtering through the car's tinted windows cast elegant shadows across her tailored navy dress. To any observer, Victoria appeared to be exactly what her husband's family believed her to be: a beautiful, well-dressed woman whose primary contributions to society involved charitable luncheons and interior decorating decisions. The reality was considerably more complex. Victoria Elena Ashford, née Castellanos, held degrees in economics from Harvard Business School and quantitative finance from the London School of Economics. She spoke 6 languages fluently, had completed advanced coursework in international banking regulations, and possessed an intuitive understanding of global financial markets that had been cultivated through 15 years of professional experience before her marriage. Yet for the past 8 years, she had maintained the carefully constructed facade of being nothing more than the devoted wife of Jonathan Ashford, heir to one of Boston's most established investment banking dynasties. The deception had been necessary for reasons that extended far beyond simple family politics. Victoria had learned early in her relationship with Jonathan that the Ashford family harbored deep-seated prejudices about women in finance, particularly women from backgrounds they considered inferior to their own social standing. Her Mexican-American heritage, despite her family's considerable wealth and her exceptional academic achievements, had been viewed as a liability by Jonathan's parents and siblings. They had grudgingly accepted her into their family's circle, only after concluding that her beauty and compliance made her an acceptable ornament for their ambitious son's public image. Jonathan himself remained largely unaware of his family's condescending attitudes toward his wife, or perhaps he chose to ignore them, because addressing the situation would require confronting uncomfortable truths about the people he loved and respected. He genuinely cared for Victoria and appreciated her intelligence, but he had never fully grasped the extent of her professional capabilities or the sacrifices she had made to maintain harmony within his family structure. Their marriage existed in a delicate equilibrium where Victoria's true nature remained carefully hidden to preserve relationships that mattered deeply to her husband. The Mercedes turned onto Commonwealth Avenue, approaching the exclusive private club where the monthly Ashford family investment dinner would take place. These gatherings had become a cornerstone of Victoria's married life. Events where Jonathan's relatives would discuss their various business ventures, investment strategies, and financial achievements while she listened politely and contributed only when asked direct questions about household management or social activities. The other family members treated these dinners as opportunities to demonstrate their financial acumen and business sophistication to one another, creating an atmosphere of competitive intellectualism that explicitly excluded Victoria from meaningful participation. Victoria had attended 47 of these monthly dinners over the past 4 years, maintaining her role as the quiet, supportive wife who smiled appropriately and asked innocent questions that allowed the men to elaborate on their business insights. She had mastered the art of appearing interested without seeming knowledgeable, engaged without being threatening, and supportive without being substantive. The performance required considerable self-discipline, particularly when family members made financial decisions that Victoria recognized as fundamentally flawed or discussed market opportunities they were approaching in ways that would likely result in significant losses. The irony of her situation had become increasingly apparent as Victoria observed the Ashford family's financial activities from her position of enforced invisibility. Jonathan's father, Richard Ashford, had built the family's reputation on conservative investment strategies that had worked well during previous decades, but were becoming increasingly inadequate for navigating contemporary market conditions. His older brother Marcus had expanded into real estate development without sufficient understanding of the regulatory and financing complexities involved in large-scale projects. His younger sister, Catherine, had launched a boutique investment fund that was hemorrhaging money due to poor risk assessment and inadequate due diligence procedures. Victoria watched these developments with the trained eye of someone who had spent years analyzing similar situations for institutional clients. But her insights remained unutilized, because sharing them would require revealing the professional background she had worked so diligently to conceal. The family's financial challenges were becoming more serious with each passing month. Yet they continued to make decisions based on outdated assumptions and incomplete information, while dismissing the one person among them who possessed the expertise necessary to help them navigate their difficulties successfully. The most frustrating aspect of Victoria's circumstances was her growing awareness that the Ashford family's condescending treatment of her was preventing them from accessing resources that could have transformed their financial situation. Victoria had not simply abandoned her career when she married Jonathan. She had redirected her professional activities into investments and business ventures that operated under carefully constructed corporate structures designed to maintain her anonymity. Over the past 8 years, she had built a diversified portfolio of holdings that generated substantial returns while remaining completely invisible to her husband's family. Victoria's most significant achievement during her years of supposed domestic inactivity had been the strategic acquisition of Metropolitan Trust Bank, a mid-sized regional institution that had been struggling with management transitions and regulatory challenges. Victoria had identified the bank as an undervalued asset with tremendous potential for growth under competent leadership. Through a series of carefully orchestrated transactions involving multiple corporate entities and international investment vehicles, she had gradually acquired controlling interest in the institution while remaining completely anonymous to both the bank's management and the broader financial community. The acquisition had required 3 years of patient maneuvering and substantial capital investment, but the results had exceeded Victoria's most optimistic projections. Under new management that Victoria had personally selected and coached, Metropolitan Trust Bank had become one of the most profitable and well-regarded financial institutions in the New England region. The bank's mortgage division, in particular, had experienced dramatic growth by offering competitive rates and innovative lending products that appealed to affluent professionals and business owners throughout the Boston metropolitan area. What made Victoria's ownership of Metropolitan Trust Bank particularly significant was the fact that the institution held mortgages on virtually every property owned by members of the Ashford family. Richard Ashford's primary residence, his vacation home in the Hamptons, and his commercial real estate investments were all financed through Metropolitan Trust Bank. Marcus Ashford's development projects relied heavily on construction loans and permanent financing provided by the institution. Catherine Ashford had refinanced her personal residence through the bank to access capital for her struggling investment fund. Even Jonathan had obtained the mortgage for their Beacon Hill townhouse through Metropolitan Trust Bank, though he remained unaware of his wife's connection to the institution. The irony of the situation was not lost on Victoria, as she prepared for another evening of being treated as an ornamental addition to the family's financial discussions. The people who dismissed her as a kept woman were, in fact, financially dependent upon institutions she controlled. Their mortgages, construction loans, and lines of credit were subject to terms and conditions that Victoria ultimately determined through her influence over the bank's lending policies. She held the power to significantly impact their financial security. Yet they treated her as if she possessed no understanding of business or finance whatsoever. Victoria had not pursued this position of hidden influence for vindictive purposes, but rather because she recognized genuine opportunities for profitable investment, while maintaining the domestic tranquility that mattered to her husband. She loved Jonathan deeply and respected his commitment to his family, even when that family treated her with subtle condescension and dismissal. Her financial activities represented a form of insurance against future uncertainties, while providing her with intellectual stimulation and professional satisfaction that her public role as a devoted wife could not supply. As the Mercedes approached the Union Club, Victoria reflected on the evening ahead and the delicate balance she would need to maintain between her public persona and her private knowledge. She would smile politely while listening to Richard Ashford explain investment strategies that she could improve significantly. She would nod approvingly while Marcus Ashford discussed development projects that she was actually financing through her bank. She would ask innocent questions while Catherine Ashford described financial challenges that Victoria could resolve with a single phone call. The performance would require all of Victoria's considerable diplomatic skills, but she had perfected the art of appearing less knowledgeable than she actually was. Tonight, like every other family dinner, she would allow the Ashford family to maintain their illusions about her capabilities and contributions, while privately observing their financial decisions with the trained analytical perspective of someone who controlled far more resources than any of them realized. Victoria understood that this carefully maintained deception could not continue indefinitely. The Ashford family's financial situation was becoming increasingly precarious, and their dismissive treatment of her was preventing them from accessing the assistance they desperately needed. Eventually, circumstances would force her to choose between maintaining her comfortable anonymity and revealing the truth about her professional capabilities and business holdings. When that moment arrived, Victoria was confident that the family's perception of her would undergo a transformation that would permanently alter their relationships and force them to confront the reality of their assumptions and prejudices. The evening ahead would prove to be more significant than Victoria anticipated, though she could not yet foresee the specific events that would finally compel her to abandon her carefully constructed facade and demonstrate the true extent of her influence over their financial destinies. The Union Club's mahogany-paneled dining room had witnessed decades of significant financial discussions among Boston's most influential families, and tonight's gathering would follow the established traditions that had governed such meetings for generations. Crystal chandeliers cast warm light over tables set with fine china and sterling silver, creating an atmosphere of refined elegance that reflected the social status and financial achievements of the club's membership. Victoria had grown accustomed to these surroundings during her years of marriage to Jonathan, but she never forgot that her acceptance in these circles remained contingent upon maintaining the carefully constructed image of appropriate feminine compliance. Jonathan helped Victoria from her coat as they entered the private dining room where the extended Ashford family had gathered for their monthly investment review. The scene was achingly familiar, Richard Ashford holding court at the head of the table while discussing market conditions with the authority of someone whose opinions had been respected for decades, Marcus Ashford reviewing architectural drawings for his latest development project, and Catherine Ashford typing notes into her tablet while preparing to present her fund's quarterly performance report. The wives and girlfriends of the various family members occupied their customary positions as attentive listeners, whose primary responsibility involved asking questions that would allow the men to elaborate on their business insights. Victoria took her designated seat beside Jonathan and surveyed the faces of people who had come to represent a significant portion of her social world over the past 8 years. These were intelligent, accomplished individuals who had achieved genuine success in their respective fields. Yet their treatment of her revealed blindness to capabilities that existed outside their preconceived notions of appropriate gender roles and social hierarchies. Their dismissiveness was not born of malicious intent, but rather from cultural assumptions that had been reinforced throughout their lives by social structures that rewarded conformity to established patterns of behavior and relationship dynamics. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel, it means a lot to us. Now back to the story. The evening's conversation began with Richard Ashford's customary market analysis, delivered with the confident authority of someone whose investment advice had generated substantial returns for family members and close friends over many years. Victoria listened attentively while privately evaluating his insights through the analytical framework she had developed during her professional career, and refined through her subsequent business activities. Richard's analysis was competent but incomplete, missing several key factors that would significantly impact the investment opportunities he was recommending to the family. Victoria possessed information that could have enhanced Richard's investment strategy considerably, including insights derived from her bank's lending activities, her analysis of emerging market trends, and her understanding of regulatory changes that would affect various industry sectors. Yet sharing this knowledge would require explaining how she had acquired such detailed understanding of complex financial matters, which would inevitably lead to questions about her background and current activities that she was not prepared to answer publicly. Marcus Ashford's presentation of his latest development project provided another example of the family's financial vulnerability that Victoria observed with growing concern. The project involved constructing luxury condominiums in a rapidly gentrifying neighborhood where property values were rising quickly, but where zoning regulations and infrastructure limitations created significant risks for large-scale development. Marcus had secured preliminary financing for the project, but his financial projections appeared overly optimistic and failed to account for several cost factors that could transform a profitable venture into a substantial loss. Victoria knew the specific details of Marcus's financing arrangements because Metropolitan Trust Bank was providing a significant portion of the construction funding for his project. She had reviewed the loan applications personally and had insisted on conservative lending terms that would protect the bank's interests, even if the development encountered the problems she anticipated. Marcus remained unaware that his sister-in-law controlled the institution providing his financing, but Victoria's involvement gave her unique insights into both the project's potential and its vulnerabilities. Catherine Ashford's quarterly report on her boutique investment fund revealed the most serious financial challenges within the family structure. The fund had been hemorrhaging assets due to poor investment selections and inadequate risk management procedures, problems that Catherine attributed to temporary market volatility rather than acknowledging the fundamental flaws in her investment approach. Victoria recognized that Catherine's fund was approaching a crisis point where continued losses would force either significant changes in strategy or complete liquidation of the remaining assets. The irony of Catherine's situation was particularly acute because Victoria possessed exactly the type of expertise and industry connections that could have rescued the struggling fund. Victoria's background in quantitative finance and her current involvement in various investment activities had provided her with insights and strategies that could have addressed Catherine's problems effectively. Yet Catherine continued to make fundamental errors in judgment while remaining completely unaware that potential solutions existed within her own extended family. As the evening progressed, Victoria found herself listening to increasingly detailed discussions of financial matters where her knowledge and experience could have provided valuable contributions. The family members spoke openly about their challenges and concerns, apparently confident that Victoria would not understand the significance of their disclosures or possess insights relevant to their business decisions. Their casual dismissal of her potential contributions created a surreal atmosphere where Victoria felt like an invisible observer of conversations that directly affected institutions and investments she actually controlled. The most challenging aspect of Victoria's position was maintaining appropriate emotional responses to information that affected her both personally and professionally. When Richard Ashford expressed concern about rising interest rates and their potential impact on real estate investments, Victoria knew that his worries were well-founded because she was actively involved in setting lending policies that would influence the financing costs he was discussing. When Marcus Ashford complained about delays in securing construction financing approvals, Victoria understood the specific regulatory requirements causing those delays because her bank's lending officers consulted with her on complex approval decisions. Victoria had developed sophisticated techniques for managing these situations while maintaining her carefully constructed public persona. She had learned to ask questions that appeared naive but actually elicited information she needed for her business decisions. She had mastered the art of making suggestions that seemed to emerge naturally from casual conversation, rather than professional analysis. Most importantly, she had become expert at expressing appropriate levels of interest and concern without revealing the depth of her understanding or the extent of her personal involvement in the matters being discussed. The psychological toll of maintaining this elaborate deception had grown increasingly difficult as Victoria's business activities expanded and her influence over the family's financial situation became more significant. She genuinely cared about the welfare of Jonathan's family members, even those who treated her dismissively, and she wanted to help them avoid the financial mistakes she could see them making. Yet providing effective assistance would require revealing the professional background and current business activities she had worked so carefully to conceal. Victoria's situation represented a complex web of personal relationships, business interests, and social expectations that had become increasingly difficult to navigate as the stakes involved continued to rise. Her love for Jonathan and her desire to maintain family harmony had initially justified the sacrifices required to maintain her public persona. But those same commitments were now preventing her from providing assistance that could benefit everyone involved. The contradictions in her position were becoming unsustainable, yet she could not identify any path forward that would not require significant personal and professional risks. As the dinner conversation continued around topics where Victoria possessed extensive expertise but was expected to remain silent, she found herself contemplating the possibility that circumstances might eventually force her to choose between maintaining her comfortable anonymity and protecting the financial interests of people she had come to care about despite their condescending treatment. The evening was progressing in ways that would soon test the sustainability of the elaborate facade she had maintained for so many years. The mahogany grandfather clock in Victoria's private study chimed midnight, as she finally allowed herself to remove the carefully applied mask of pleasant compliance she had worn throughout another family dinner. The townhouse on Beacon Hill was silent, except for the soft hum of her encrypted computers processing the international financial transactions that had become the foundation of her hidden empire. Jonathan slept peacefully in their bedroom upstairs, unaware that his wife was about to spend the next 4 hours managing investments and business operations that spanned 3 continents and generated more revenue than his family's collective financial activities. Victoria's transformation from dutiful wife to international financier occurred each evening after the household settled into sleep. The persona she maintained during daylight hours required constant vigilance and careful performance, but these late-night sessions allowed her to exercise the analytical capabilities and strategic thinking that had once made her one of the most sought-after financial consultants in London's banking district. The intellectual stimulation and professional satisfaction she derived from these activities sustained her through the daily challenges of maintaining her carefully constructed public image. The private study that served as Victoria's command center had been designed to appear as nothing more than an elegant reading room, where she might pursue appropriate feminine interests, such as literature or charitable planning. The antique writing desk and floor-to-ceiling bookshelves created an atmosphere of refined domesticity that would satisfy any casual observer. Yet hidden behind the leather-bound classics were servers, monitors, and communication equipment that connected Victoria to financial markets, corporate boardrooms, and investment opportunities across the globe. Victoria's business operations had evolved organically from her initial frustration with the limited intellectual challenges available to her as Jonathan's wife. During the early years of their marriage, she had begun making modest investments using funds from her previous career savings, approaching each transaction as both a financial opportunity and a mental exercise that could preserve her analytical skills during her enforced professional hiatus. The success of these initial investments had encouraged her to pursue larger and more complex opportunities, gradually building a portfolio that required increasingly sophisticated management strategies. The acquisition of Metropolitan Trust Bank had represented the culmination of 3 years of patient planning and strategic maneuvering that demonstrated Victoria's evolution from individual investor to institutional player. She had identified the bank as an undervalued asset during her systematic analysis of regional financial institutions, recognizing that its struggles with management transitions and regulatory compliance masked fundamental strengths that could be leveraged for substantial growth under competent leadership. The acquisition process had required Victoria to navigate complex regulatory requirements while maintaining complete anonymity regarding her involvement in the transaction. She had established a network of corporate entities and investment vehicles that allowed her to accumulate shares gradually without triggering disclosure requirements that would reveal her identity to either the bank's existing management or the broader financial community. The legal and financial complexity of these arrangements had tested every aspect of her professional expertise, while providing intellectual challenges that far exceeded anything available through her public role as Jonathan's supportive wife. Victoria's management of Metropolitan Trust Bank illustrated the depth of her strategic thinking and operational capabilities. Rather than simply acquiring the institution as a passive investment, she had developed comprehensive plans for improving its performance through enhanced lending practices, expanded service offerings, and technological upgrades that would position it for sustained growth in an increasingly competitive market environment. The bank's remarkable transformation from struggling regional institution to profitable market leader had been achieved through Victoria's careful selection and coaching of management personnel, who implemented her strategic vision while remaining unaware of her ultimate authority over their operations. The mortgage portfolio that had become central to Victoria's influence over the Ashford family represented only a small portion of Metropolitan Trust Bank's total assets. Yet it provided her with detailed insights into their financial circumstances and decision-making processes. Victoria had not actively pursued loans from Jonathan's family members, but their choice to refinance existing mortgages and secure new financing through her institution had created opportunities for her to monitor their financial health and assess the sustainability of their various business ventures. Richard Ashford's mortgage applications had revealed the concerning extent to which his investment strategies relied on leverage and refinancing rather than generating sustainable returns from underlying assets. His primary residence, vacation properties, and commercial investments were all encumbered with debt levels that left little margin for error if market conditions became unfavorable or if his income streams experienced disruption. Victoria's analysis of his financial statements suggested that his reputation for conservative investment management was based more on past performance than current practices. Marcus Ashford's construction loans provided Victoria with unprecedented access to the details of his development projects, including cost projections, timeline estimates, and market analysis that revealed significant gaps in his planning and risk assessment procedures. The luxury condominium project that had been the focus of discussion at the evening's family dinner was particularly problematic, with financing requirements that exceeded realistic revenue projections and development timelines that failed to account for regulatory approval processes and construction challenges that Victoria recognized from her analysis of similar projects. Catherine Ashford's financial situation was perhaps the most precarious within the family structure. Her mortgage refinancing had been necessitated by the need to inject capital into her struggling investment fund, creating a dangerous situation where her personal residence was being used as collateral to support business activities that were generating consistent losses rather than sustainable returns. Victoria's review of Catherine's investment strategies had identified fundamental flaws in her risk management and asset selection processes that would likely result in continued losses unless significant changes were implemented immediately. The irony of Victoria's position as silent observer of the Ashford family's financial challenges was compounded by her growing recognition that she possessed both the expertise and resources necessary to address their problems effectively. Her background in quantitative finance and risk management provided her with analytical tools that could identify profitable investment opportunities and develop strategies for avoiding the pitfalls that were threatening the family's financial security. Her control of Metropolitan Trust Bank gave her direct influence over their financing costs and access to capital. Her international investment network could provide access to opportunities and partnerships that were not available through their current business relationships. Yet Victoria's ability to provide assistance remained constrained by the elaborate deception she had constructed to maintain domestic harmony and social acceptance within Jonathan's family circle. Any attempt to offer meaningful financial advice or business insights would inevitably raise questions about how she had acquired such detailed knowledge of complex investment matters. The expertise she displayed would need to be explained in ways that were consistent with her public persona as someone whose primary interests involved household management and social activities rather than international finance and corporate strategy. Victoria's frustration with these limitations had intensified as she observed the family making increasingly poor financial decisions while dismissing her potential contributions. During family dinners and social gatherings, she would listen to discussions of investment opportunities that she recognized as fundamentally flawed, or market analyses that ignored critical factors that would determine success or failure. Her attempts to ask innocent questions or make subtle suggestions were either ignored entirely or dismissed as the naive inquiries of someone who could not possibly understand the complexities of serious business decisions. The psychological toll of maintaining her dual existence had grown more challenging as Victoria's business operations expanded and her influence over significant financial institutions increased. The contrast between her daytime role as decorative wife and her nighttime responsibilities as international financier created cognitive dissonance that required constant mental discipline to manage effectively. She had developed sophisticated techniques for compartmentalizing these different aspects of her identity, but the emotional strain of suppressing her professional capabilities during social interactions had become increasingly difficult to sustain. Victoria's commitment to protecting her marriage and maintaining family relationships had motivated her initial decision to conceal her business activities, but those same motivations were now preventing her from providing assistance that could benefit everyone involved. Jonathan genuinely loved and respected her, yet he remained unaware of the extent of her professional capabilities and business achievements. His family members cared about her welfare in their own limited way, yet their condescending assumptions about her intelligence and capabilities prevented them from recognizing her potential value as an advisor and collaborator. The financial intelligence Victoria gathered through her various business operations provided her with insights into market trends and investment opportunities that could have enhanced the Ashford family's financial performance significantly. Her analysis of international banking regulations, emerging market conditions, and technological disruptions in financial services revealed opportunities and threats that were not apparent to investors who relied solely on traditional information sources and analytical methods. Her network of professional relationships with institutional investors, regulatory officials, and industry experts could provide access to deals and partnerships that would be otherwise unavailable to individual investors operating independently. Victoria's overnight sessions in her private study had evolved into comprehensive strategic planning activities that addressed both her personal business interests and her growing concern about the Ashford family's financial trajectory. She had developed detailed analyses of each family member's investment portfolio, identifying specific risks and opportunities that could be addressed through relatively modest changes in strategy and asset allocation. She had prepared recommendations for improving their collective financial performance through coordinated investment activities and shared resources that would reduce individual risks while enhancing overall returns. These strategic plans remained locked in encrypted files on Victoria's personal servers, unutilized because implementing them would require revealing the professional background and current business activities she had worked so diligently to conceal. The solutions to the family's financial problems existed within their own household, yet cultural assumptions and social expectations prevented those solutions from being recognized or implemented. As Victoria concluded another late-night session of international financial management and prepared to transform herself back into the compliant wife expected by Jonathan's family, she contemplated the increasingly unsustainable nature of her carefully constructed deception. The Ashford family's financial challenges were becoming more serious. With each passing month, their dismissive treatment of her was preventing them from accessing assistance they desperately needed, and her own business operations were reaching a scale that would eventually require more direct involvement in public financial activities. The convergence of these factors suggested that Victoria would soon be forced to choose between maintaining her comfortable anonymity and revealing the truth about her professional capabilities and business holdings. When that moment arrived, the shock of discovery would fundamentally alter every relationship within the extended family structure, forcing all parties to confront the reality of their assumptions and the consequences of their dismissive attitudes toward her potential contributions. Victoria understood that her carefully maintained facade could not continue indefinitely, yet she could not predict the specific circumstances that would eventually compel her to abandon her comfortable invisibility and demonstrate the true extent of her influence over their collective financial destinies. The morning sun filtered through the tall windows of Victoria's breakfast room as she reviewed the overnight financial reports that had arrived from her international business operations. The routine analysis of market movements and portfolio performance should have provided its customary sense of professional satisfaction, yet the documents spread across her mahogany table carried news that would fundamentally alter her carefully maintained equilibrium between public persona and private empire. Metropolitan Trust Bank's quarterly risk assessment report contained information that made Victoria's stomach tighten with apprehension. The Ashford family's collective debt exposure had reached critical levels that threatened both their individual financial security and the bank's regulatory compliance requirements. Marcus Ashford's construction project had encountered significant cost overruns and regulatory delays that would require an additional $12 million in financing to avoid default. Catherine Ashford's investment fund had suffered catastrophic losses that would force immediate liquidation unless emergency capital could be secured within 30 days. Richard Ashford's leveraged investment portfolio faced margin calls that could trigger forced asset sales at substantial losses if market volatility continued at current levels. The convergence of these financial crises presented Victoria with an impossible dilemma that she could no longer resolve through careful observation and discreet management from her position of hidden influence. Her dual role as silent family member and controlling stakeholder in their financial destinies had created conflicts of interest that were rapidly becoming unsustainable. The bank's fiduciary responsibilities to its depositors and regulatory obligations required decisive action to protect institutional assets from excessive risk exposure, yet such actions would inevitably harm the financial interests of people Victoria genuinely cared about, despite their condescending treatment of her capabilities. Victoria's analysis of the family's financial statements revealed the extent to which their individual problems had become interconnected through complex patterns of cross-guarantees, shared collateral arrangements, and joint investments that amplified risks across the entire family structure. Richard Ashford had guaranteed portions of Marcus's construction loans, using his own real estate holdings as collateral. Catherine Ashford had pledged her personal residence to secure additional investment capital for her failing fund. Jonathan had co-signed certain obligations to help his sister during previous financial difficulties, creating potential liability for debts he might not even realize he had assumed. The interconnected nature of these financial obligations meant that the failure of any single family member's business activities could trigger cascading defaults that would devastate the entire extended family's economic position. Victoria possessed the analytical tools and institutional authority necessary to restructure these arrangements in ways that would protect all parties involved, yet implementing such solutions would require revealing both her professional expertise and her control over the financial institution that held their various obligations. The urgency of the situation was compounded by external pressures that were beyond Victoria's ability to control or influence through her current methods of discreet intervention. The construction project that Marcus had been developing was subject to municipal financing requirements that mandated completion within specified timeframes or risk forfeiture of development rights worth millions of dollars. Catherine's investment fund faced regulatory scrutiny that could result in legal sanctions if adequate capital reserves were not maintained according to securities regulations. Richard's margin calls were governed by automated trading systems that would execute forced liquidations regardless of market conditions or personal circumstances. Victoria's morning review of financial news and market analysis reports revealed additional challenges that would impact the family's situation in ways they could not anticipate, based on their limited access to institutional intelligence sources. Interest rate increases being considered by the Federal Reserve would significantly increase borrowing costs for all of their existing variable rate obligations. Regulatory changes being implemented by state banking authorities would affect lending criteria for the types of projects and investments the family typically pursued. International market disruptions were creating volatility in asset classes where the family maintained substantial positions. The information asymmetry between Victoria's comprehensive understanding of these developing threats and the family's incomplete awareness of the challenges they faced created ethical obligations that transcended her personal preferences for maintaining comfortable anonymity. Her professional training and experience had taught her that fiduciary responsibilities required acting in the best interests of all stakeholders, even when such actions involved personal sacrifice or professional risk. Her position as both family member and financial institution controller created duties of care that could not be satisfied through continued passive observation of deteriorating circumstances. Victoria's contemplation of potential solutions to the family's financial crisis revealed that effective intervention would require resources and expertise that extended well beyond conventional banking services or traditional investment advice. The scale and complexity of their interconnected problems demanded comprehensive restructuring strategies that could only be implemented through coordinated efforts involving multiple financial institutions, legal counsel specializing in complex commercial transactions, and regulatory expertise to navigate compliance requirements across various jurisdictions. The irony of the situation was that Victoria possessed exactly the network of professional relationships and institutional resources necessary to orchestrate such comprehensive solutions. Yet accessing these capabilities would require abandoning the carefully constructed facade that had defined her marriage and family relationships for nearly a decade. The revelation of her true professional background and current business holdings would shock Jonathan and his family members in ways that could fundamentally alter their personal relationships, regardless of the positive financial outcomes such disclosure might generate. Victoria's analysis of alternative approaches to addressing the family's financial crisis consistently led to the same conclusion. Partial solutions that preserved her anonymity would be inadequate to address the magnitude of the problems they faced, while effective solutions would require full disclosure of her professional capabilities and business operations. The middle ground she had successfully navigated for years through careful observation and discreet influence was disappearing, as the stakes involved escalated beyond the scope of such limited interventions. The catalyst moment that would force Victoria's decision arrived unexpectedly through a phone call from her chief operating officer at Metropolitan Trust Bank. The conversation, conducted in carefully coded language to preserve confidentiality, informed Victoria that federal banking regulators had scheduled an examination of the institution's loan portfolio that would specifically focus on concentration risks and related party transactions. The examination would inevitably reveal the extent of the bank's exposure to Ashford family obligations and could result in regulatory sanctions if appropriate risk management measures were not implemented immediately. Victoria understood the implications of this development with crystalline clarity. The regulatory examination would require either immediate reduction of the bank's exposure to Ashford family loans or demonstration that such exposure was justified by adequate collateral, guarantees, or other risk mitigation measures. Achieving compliance with regulatory expectations would necessitate either calling in existing loans, substantially increasing collateral requirements, or restructuring the obligations in ways that would require detailed analysis of each borrower's financial condition and repayment capacity. Any of these approaches would inevitably reveal Victoria's intimate knowledge of the family's financial circumstances and her authority to make decisions affecting their economic futures. The regulatory timeline for addressing compliance issues would not permit the gradual, discreet interventions she had previously employed to influence outcomes while maintaining her carefully constructed anonymity. The moment of truth she had long anticipated was arriving with administrative precision and legal force that would not accommodate her personal preferences for continued concealment. Victoria's recognition of this reality triggered a profound shift in her thinking about the relationship between personal sacrifice and professional responsibility. The comfortable equilibrium she had maintained between her public role as supportive wife and her private identity as international financier had been predicated on the assumption that she could serve both functions effectively without compromising either commitment. The current crisis demonstrated that such balance was ultimately unsustainable when the stakes involved exceeded the scope of discreet intervention. The choice Victoria now faced was not simply between revelation and concealment, but between accepting responsibility for her ability to help people she cared about, or allowing those relationships to suffer consequences she had the power to prevent. The skills, resources, and institutional authority she had developed during her years of careful preparation had reached the point where they could no longer remain hidden if they were to serve their ultimate purpose of protecting and advancing the interests of those she loved. Victoria's contemplation of this decision was interrupted by the sound of Jonathan's footsteps on the stairs as he prepared to leave for his office. The normalcy of their morning routine provided a stark contrast to the magnitude of the choices she would need to make in the coming days. Their comfortable domestic patterns had been sustained through her willingness to suppress significant aspects of her identity and capabilities, yet continuing such suppression would now require accepting responsibility for preventable harm to his family's financial security. The documents spread across Victoria's breakfast table represented more than quarterly financial reports and regulatory requirements. They constituted evidence of her readiness to assume full responsibility for protecting the people who had dismissed her capabilities while remaining unaware of their dependence upon her judgment and resources. The catalyst moment she had unconsciously prepared for throughout her years of careful observation and discreet empire building had finally arrived, demanding that she choose between comfortable invisibility and the full exercise of her professional capabilities in service of those she loved. The transformation from hidden observer to active protector would require Victoria to demonstrate courage that extended far beyond financial risk management or business strategy development. She would need to risk the comfortable relationships and social acceptance she had carefully cultivated in order to provide assistance that could preserve the economic foundation upon which those same relationships ultimately depended. The paradox of her situation demanded that she potentially sacrifice personal happiness to protect the financial security that made such happiness possible for the entire extended family structure. As Victoria prepared to transition from her private mourning analysis to her public role as Jonathan's supportive wife, she understood that this routine would soon require fundamental modification. The catalyst moment that would compel her revelation was no longer a theoretical possibility, but an immediate practical necessity that would test every aspect of her character, capabilities, and commitment to the people who had underestimated her for so many years. Victoria stood before the floor-to-ceiling windows of her private study, watching the morning light illuminate Boston's financial district while her mind wrestled with the most consequential decision of her adult life. The encrypted documents spread across her desk contained detailed analyses of 3 distinct pathways forward, each carrying profound implications for her marriage, her business empire, and the financial survival of Jonathan's family. The comfortable anonymity that had sheltered her for 8 years would end regardless of which option she selected. Yet the manner of that revelation would determine whether the Ashford family emerged from their current crisis stronger and united, or fractured beyond repair. The first pathway involved immediate disclosure of her professional background and business holdings to Jonathan and his family, accompanied by comprehensive proposals for restructuring their interconnected financial obligations through Metropolitan Trust Bank and her international investment network. This approach would maximize the family's chances of recovering from their current difficulties while preserving their long-term financial security. However, such dramatic revelation would inevitably shock Jonathan's relatives in ways that could permanently damage their personal relationships, regardless of the positive economic outcomes such intervention might generate. Victoria had spent the previous evening drafting detailed presentations that would explain her educational credentials, professional experience, and current business operations in language that would be accessible to family members, whose financial sophistication varied considerably. The documents included comprehensive analyses of each individual's current financial position, specific recommendations for addressing their immediate challenges, and strategic plans for coordinating their future investment activities to achieve superior risk-adjusted returns through shared resources and collaborative decision-making processes. The thoroughness of these presentations reflected Victoria's understanding that successful family financial planning required more than simply solving immediate problems. Her proposals addressed fundamental issues in the family's approach to risk management, asset allocation, and business development that had contributed to their current difficulties. The strategic framework she had developed could transform their individual struggles into collective strength, yet implementing such comprehensive changes would require trust and collaboration that might not survive the shock of discovering her deception about her professional capabilities. The second pathway involved selective disclosure of her financial expertise, while maintaining partial concealment of the full extent of her business holdings and institutional control. This approach would allow Victoria to provide advisory services and limited financial assistance to family members without revealing her ownership of Metropolitan Trust Bank or the scale of her international investment operations. Such graduated revelation might preserve family relationships while addressing their most urgent financial needs, though it would necessarily limit the scope of assistance she could provide. Victoria recognized that partial disclosure carried significant risks of its own. Family members who discovered that she possessed extensive financial knowledge might reasonably question why she had concealed such capabilities for years, potentially leading to deeper inquiries that would eventually reveal the full extent of her business activities. Additionally, providing effective solutions to their complex financial problems would likely require resources and institutional access that could not be explained through consulting relationships or personal investment expertise alone. The third pathway involved maintaining her current anonymity while orchestrating solutions through seemingly independent third parties and institutional intermediaries. Victoria could potentially address the family's financial crisis through coordinated actions by Metropolitan Trust Bank, her investment funds, and her network of professional relationships without directly revealing her control over these resources. Such an approach would preserve her comfortable domestic arrangements, while ensuring that Jonathan's family received the assistance they needed to recover from their current difficulties. However, Victoria's analysis of this option revealed fundamental ethical and practical problems that made it unsuitable for addressing the current crisis. The scale and urgency of the family's financial problems required coordinated responses that could not be effectively implemented through indirect influence and discreet interventions. Moreover, her fiduciary responsibilities as a financial institution controller required transparency in related party transactions that would eventually expose her involvement regardless of her initial attempts at concealment. Victoria's contemplation of these alternatives was complicated by her deep understanding of the psychological and social factors that would influence family members' reactions to any revelation of her true circumstances. Jonathan's parents had invested decades in maintaining their position within Boston's financial establishment, where social status depended heavily on perceived expertise and professional accomplishment. Discovering that their son's wife possessed superior financial knowledge and controlled institutions that influenced their economic security would challenge fundamental assumptions about competence, authority, and family hierarchy that had governed their relationships for generations. Marcus Ashford's reaction would likely be particularly complex, given his role as the family's real estate development expert and his current dependence on construction financing from Victoria's bank. Learning that his sister-in-law had been evaluating his project proposals and monitoring his financial performance while maintaining a facade of domestic ignorance would almost certainly generate feelings of humiliation and betrayal that could permanently damage their personal relationship, even if her intervention ultimately saved his business ventures from failure. Catherine Ashford presented perhaps the greatest challenge in terms of managing family dynamics following any disclosure of Victoria's professional background. Catherine had built her identity around being the family's investment specialist and had consistently dismissed Victoria's potential contributions to financial discussions. Discovering that Victoria possessed superior credentials and experience in exactly the areas where Catherine claimed expertise would likely trigger defensive reactions that could escalate into lasting resentment and family conflict. Victoria's analysis of Jonathan's probable response to learning about her concealed professional activities revealed the most personally significant risks associated with full disclosure. Jonathan had married her believing that she was primarily interested in domestic pursuits and social activities, rather than challenging professional endeavors. While he respected her intelligence and appreciated her insights on various topics, he had never been required to adjust his self-concept to accommodate a spouse whose professional achievements exceeded his own, or whose business operations generated greater financial returns than his established career in corporate law. The potential impact on their marriage extended beyond simple issues of damaged trust or wounded pride. Jonathan's entire family structure and social identity had been built around assumptions about appropriate gender roles and relationship dynamics that Victoria's revelation would fundamentally challenge. His comfortable position as primary breadwinner and financial decision-maker within their household would require complete revision if he acknowledged the reality of his wife's business empire and institutional authority. Yet Victoria's consideration of these relationship risks was balanced against her growing recognition that continued concealment carried even greater dangers for everyone involved. The Ashford family's financial crisis was rapidly approaching a point where traditional solutions would be inadequate to prevent significant losses of wealth, property, and business assets that had been accumulated over generations. Her unique combination of expertise, resources, and institutional access represented their best opportunity for recovery and future financial security, yet those capabilities could only be effectively utilized through honest acknowledgement of her professional background and current business operations. Victoria's decision-making process was further complicated by her understanding of the broader social and economic implications of her choice. The financial difficulties facing Jonathan's family were not unique within their social circle or economic class. Many established families were struggling to adapt traditional investment approaches to contemporary market conditions, regulatory requirements, and technological disruptions that demanded new forms of expertise and institutional relationships. Victoria's successful navigation of these challenges had positioned her to provide leadership and guidance that could benefit not only her immediate family but also their broader community of friends and business associates. The prospect of assuming such a public leadership role both excited and intimidated Victoria. Her years of careful preparation and systematic empire building had equipped her with capabilities that were desperately needed within her social and professional environment, yet exercising those capabilities would require abandoning the comfortable invisibility that had protected her from the social and professional pressures typically faced by prominent business leaders. Success in helping Jonathan's family would inevitably lead to recognition and expectations that would fundamentally alter her lifestyle and personal relationships in ways that extended far beyond their immediate household. Victoria's contemplation of these larger implications was interrupted by a secure phone call from her chief legal counsel regarding the upcoming federal banking examination. The conversation confirmed that regulatory authorities expected comprehensive documentation of all related party transactions within 30 days, along with detailed risk assessments and mitigation strategies for any lending relationships that might pose concentration risks to the institution. The timeline for compliance would not accommodate gradual revelation or partial disclosure strategies that might preserve family relationships while addressing regulatory requirements. This external pressure crystallized Victoria's understanding that her decision was no longer primarily about personal preferences or relationship management, but about professional responsibility and ethical obligation. Her fiduciary duties as a financial institution controller required actions that would inevitably reveal her involvement in the family's financial affairs. Regardless of her personal comfort with such disclosure, the choice was not whether to reveal her true circumstances, but how to manage that revelation in ways that would maximize positive outcomes for all stakeholders involved. Victoria's recognition of this reality triggered a fundamental shift in her decision-making framework. Rather than focusing on preserving her current comfortable arrangements, she began evaluating options based on their potential to generate the best long-term outcomes for Jonathan, his family, and the financial institutions under her control. This perspective revealed that comprehensive disclosure accompanied by detailed solutions to the family's financial problems offered the greatest probability of success, despite the short-term relationship challenges such revelation might create. The courage required for such disclosure extended beyond simple acknowledgement of her professional background and business holdings. Victoria would need to assume full responsibility for the deception she had maintained for 8 years, while simultaneously demonstrating that such deception had been motivated by protective instincts rather than manipulative intentions. She would need to present her business achievements as resources for family benefit rather than personal aggrandizement. Most importantly, she would need to guide family members through their shock and adjustment to new relationship dynamics, while maintaining focus on the urgent financial challenges that required immediate attention. Victoria's preparation for this revelation began with developing communication strategies that would minimize defensiveness and maximize collaboration among family members who had previously dismissed her potential contributions. She understood that successful family financial planning required not only technical expertise and institutional resources, but also psychological insight and interpersonal skills that could transform potential conflict into productive partnership. The same analytical capabilities that had enabled her business success would need to be applied to managing family dynamics during their period of adjustment to dramatically altered circumstances. As Victoria finalized her decision to pursue comprehensive disclosure accompanied by detailed solution proposals, she reflected on the personal transformation this choice would require. The comfortable anonymity that had defined her married life would be replaced by visibility and accountability that would test every aspect of her character, capabilities, and commitment to the people she loved. Yet this transition also represented the culmination of years of careful preparation and the opportunity to utilize her unique combination of resources and relationships in service of outcomes that could benefit everyone involved. The decision point that had seemed impossibly complex only hours earlier now appeared clear and inevitable. Victoria would reveal the full extent of her professional background and business operations to Jonathan and his family, accompanied by comprehensive proposals for addressing their financial crisis and coordinating their future investment activities. The risks were substantial, but the potential rewards for successful navigation of this challenge extended far beyond simple financial recovery to encompass strengthened family relationships based on honest recognition of each member's actual capabilities and contributions. Victoria understood that this choice would irrevocably alter every aspect of her existence. Yet she embraced that transformation as the necessary evolution from comfortable concealment to purposeful service. The skills and resources she had developed during her years of hidden preparation were finally ready to serve their intended purpose of protecting and advancing the interests of those she loved most deeply. Victoria's hands remained steady as she arranged the leather portfolio containing 8 years of carefully documented evidence that would transform her from dismissed ornament into recognized authority within the Ashford family financial structure. The mahogany conference table in Jonathan's home office had hosted countless discussions about legal cases and business transactions, yet this morning it would serve as the stage for revelations that would fundamentally alter every relationship within their extended family network. She had chosen to begin with Jonathan alone, understanding that his reaction would establish the foundation for all subsequent family interactions regarding her concealed professional identity and business empire. The decision to initiate disclosure through private conversation with her husband reflected Victoria's strategic understanding that successful family transformation required careful sequencing and psychological preparation. Jonathan's initial shock and adjustment period needed to occur away from the competitive dynamics and social pressures that characterized group family meetings. His ability to process and accept her revelation would directly influence his capacity to serve as advocate and translator when the broader family required similar adjustment to dramatically altered circumstances. Victoria had structured the presentation materials to reveal her professional background and business achievements through logical progression that would allow Jonathan to absorb each level of information before encountering more complex or surprising details. The initial documents established her educational credentials and previous career accomplishments through official transcripts, professional certifications, and recommendation letters that provided third-party validation of her expertise. The subsequent materials detailed her investment activities and business development work during their marriage, demonstrating the systematic approach she had employed to build substantial financial resources while maintaining domestic responsibilities. The final section of her presentation addressed Metropolitan Trust Bank ownership and the implications of this institutional control for addressing the current family financial crisis. Victoria had prepared detailed analyses of each family member's outstanding obligations, specific recommendations for restructuring their debt arrangements, and comprehensive strategies for coordinating their future investment activities to achieve superior returns through shared resources and collaborative decision-making processes. The thoroughness of these materials would demonstrate both her intimate knowledge of their financial circumstances and her commitment to using that knowledge for collective benefit rather than personal advantage. Jonathan's arrival at his home office occurred precisely at the appointed time, reflecting the punctuality and professional discipline that had characterized his successful legal career. Victoria observed his expression as he noticed the unusual formality of her presentation setup, recognizing the subtle shift from casual domestic interaction to serious business discussion that her preparations had created. His willingness to engage with whatever proposal she intended to present would determine whether their marriage could successfully incorporate the professional partnership that her revelation would make possible. Victoria began her disclosure with carefully chosen words that acknowledged the unprecedented nature of their conversation while establishing her commitment to complete honesty regarding circumstances she had previously concealed. She explained that her decision to maintain professional anonymity during their marriage had been motivated by protective instincts rather than deceptive intentions, emphasizing her desire to preserve family harmony and social relationships that mattered deeply to Jonathan. Her acknowledgement of the deception itself preceded any discussion of her actual credentials or business activities, establishing accountability and responsibility as the foundation for all subsequent revelations. Jonathan's initial reaction combined surprise, confusion, and hurt, in proportions that Victoria had anticipated, based on her understanding of his personality and their relationship dynamics. His primary concern focused on the implications of her concealment for their marital trust, rather than the practical significance of her professional capabilities. Victoria allowed him to express these feelings completely before proceeding with documentation that would establish the breadth and depth of her business achievements. She understood that emotional processing needed to occur alongside factual revelation if their relationship was to successfully navigate this fundamental transformation. The presentation of Victoria's educational credentials generated Jonathan's first positive response to her disclosure, as he recognized the prestigious institutions and advanced programs that had shaped her professional development. His legal background provided him with frameworks for evaluating academic achievements and professional qualifications that made this aspect of her revelation more accessible than the business operations that would follow. Victoria observed his growing recognition that her intellectual capabilities had been significantly underestimated by his family members, including himself. Victoria's explanation of her previous career in international finance required more detailed discussion to help Jonathan understand the scope and significance of her professional experience. She provided context about the competitive nature of London's financial markets and the exceptional performance required to achieve senior positions within major institutional environments. The recommendation letters from former colleagues and supervisors offered external validation of her expertise that helped Jonathan comprehend why she had found the domestic limitations of their social circle intellectually frustrating. The revelation of Victoria's investment activities during their marriage initially generated defensive reactions from Jonathan, who struggled to understand why she had not shared these pursuits with him or sought his input regarding significant financial decisions. Victoria explained that her investment work had begun as intellectual exercise designed to maintain her analytical skills while fulfilling domestic expectations, but had evolved into substantial business operations, as her success attracted larger opportunities and greater responsibilities. She emphasized that her decision to maintain independence in these activities reflected her understanding of family expectations rather than lack of trust in his judgment or partnership. Jonathan's reaction to learning about Metropolitan Trust Bank ownership represented the most emotionally complex portion of Victoria's disclosure process. The revelation that his wife controlled the financial institution that held mortgages on family properties initially generated feelings of manipulation and betrayal that required extensive discussion to resolve. Victoria presented detailed documentation of the acquisition process, emphasizing that her involvement in family financing had been coincidental, rather than deliberately orchestrated to create leverage or control over their personal relationships. The ethical implications of Victoria's position as both family member and institutional controller required careful exploration to establish appropriate boundaries and transparency for future interactions. Jonathan's legal training helped him understand the fiduciary responsibilities and regulatory requirements that governed her decision-making authority, yet the personal dimensions of these institutional relationships remained emotionally challenging for him to accept. Victoria acknowledged these concerns while explaining how regulatory pressures had made continued concealment impossible, regardless of her personal preferences for maintaining comfortable anonymity. Victoria's presentation of specific solutions to the current family financial crisis helped shift Jonathan's focus from past deceptions to future opportunities for collaborative problem-solving. The comprehensive analyses she had prepared demonstrated both her intimate knowledge of each family member's circumstances and her commitment to using that knowledge for collective benefit. Jonathan recognized that her unique combination of expertise, resources, and institutional access represented their best opportunity for addressing problems that had seemed intractable through conventional approaches. The detailed restructuring proposals Victoria had developed required extensive explanation to help Jonathan understand the technical and strategic considerations involved in coordinating multiple family members' financial obligations. Her recommendations addressed not only immediate crisis resolution, but also long-term improvements in their collective approach to risk management, asset allocation, and business development. Jonathan's growing appreciation for the sophistication of her strategic thinking helped him begin to envision how their marriage could incorporate professional partnership alongside personal relationship. Jonathan's initial resistance to the scope and complexity of Victoria's business operations gradually transformed into recognition of the extraordinary capabilities she had developed while maintaining her role as supportive wife. His understanding of her daily routine required complete revision as he learned about the international communications, strategic planning, and operational management activities she conducted during her supposed leisure time. The discipline and dedication required to maintain such extensive professional responsibilities while fulfilling domestic expectations earned his respect and admiration. The most challenging aspect of Victoria's disclosure involved helping Jonathan understand how his family's dismissive treatment of her capabilities had prevented them from recognizing resources that could have addressed their financial problems much earlier. She presented this information carefully to avoid generating defensive reactions while establishing the need for fundamental changes in family dynamics if her assistance was to be effective. Jonathan's recognition of his own participation in underestimating his wife's potential contributions created personal accountability that would be essential for successful family transformation. Victoria's presentation concluded with specific timelines and action plans for addressing the regulatory examination requirements and family financial crisis simultaneously. She emphasized that successful implementation would require coordination and collaboration among all family members, with Jonathan serving as primary liaison and advocate during their adjustment period. The urgency of external pressures made immediate action necessary, yet the complexity of required changes demanded careful management to preserve family relationships while achieving essential financial objectives. Jonathan's response to the complete revelation demonstrated the emotional maturity and professional judgment that had attracted Victoria to him initially and sustained their marriage through 8 years of carefully maintained deception. His ability to process shock and hurt while recognizing the practical necessities of their current situation reflected character strengths that would be essential for guiding his family through their coming adjustment period. Victoria observed with relief and gratitude that the foundation of their relationship remained strong enough to support the dramatic expansion of partnership and collaboration that her revelation would require. The success of this initial disclosure provided Victoria with confidence that subsequent family conversations could achieve similar positive outcomes, despite the greater complexity of group dynamics and competitive relationships. Jonathan's commitment to serving as advocate and translator during broader family discussions would be crucial for managing the shock and resistance that other family members would inevitably experience upon learning about her concealed professional background and institutional authority. Victoria understood that this first step represented only the beginning of a comprehensive transformation process that would test every aspect of her leadership capabilities and interpersonal skills. The technical challenges of restructuring family financial obligations would prove straightforward compared to the psychological and social adjustments required to establish new relationship dynamics based on honest recognition of each member's actual capabilities and contributions. Yet her successful navigation of Jonathan's initial reaction demonstrated that courage and transparency could indeed transform potential conflict into productive partnership, when approached with appropriate preparation and genuine commitment to collective benefit. Victoria recognized that her successful disclosure to Jonathan represented merely the foundational step in a complex process of family transformation that would require sophisticated understanding of group psychology, strategic communication, and crisis management under intense emotional pressure. The week following her initial revelation to her husband became an intensive period of preparation and skill development, as she adapted her business management expertise to the unique challenges of restructuring entrenched family dynamics, while simultaneously addressing urgent financial obligations that could not await resolution of interpersonal conflicts. The complexity of managing simultaneous personal and professional transformations demanded capabilities that extended beyond Victoria's existing skill set, despite her extensive experience in corporate restructuring and institutional management. Family systems operated according to psychological and social principles that differed significantly from business organizations, where authority structures and performance metrics provided clear frameworks for decision-making and conflict resolution. The Ashford family's relationships had been shaped by decades of shared history, established hierarchies, and emotional investments that would influence their reactions to her revelations in ways that could not be predicted through conventional analytical methods. Victoria's preparation for the expanded family disclosure involved systematic study of family business literature, consultation with experts in organizational psychology, and development of communication strategies specifically designed to minimize defensive reactions while maximizing collaborative potential among individuals with diverse personalities and competing interests. She recognized that her success in helping Jonathan process her revelation had been facilitated by the privacy and emotional intimacy of their marital relationship, advantages that would not be available during group discussions where social dynamics and competitive instincts would complicate individual adjustment processes. The strategic framework Victoria developed for managing the broader family revelation incorporated lessons learned from her corporate experience with organizational change management, adapted to address the unique characteristics of family systems and the specific personalities involved in the Ashford family structure. She understood that successful transformation would require addressing both rational concerns about financial strategies and emotional needs related to respect, recognition, and maintaining dignity despite dramatically altered circumstances. Victoria's analysis of each family member's probable reaction patterns led her to develop individualized communication approaches that would acknowledge their specific concerns while guiding them toward acceptance of necessary changes. Richard Ashford's response would likely focus on maintaining his authority and expertise within the family financial hierarchy, requiring careful presentation of her capabilities as complementary rather than competitive with his established role. Marcus Ashford's reaction would probably involve defensive pride regarding his business judgment, necessitating emphasis on collaborative partnership rather than remedial intervention in his development projects. Catherine Ashford presented the most complex psychological challenge, given her professional investment in being recognized as the family's financial expert, and her history of dismissive attitudes toward Victoria's intellectual capabilities. Victoria understood that Catherine's acceptance of the new reality would require not only acknowledgement of superior credentials and resources, but also face-saving opportunities to maintain her sense of professional competence and family contribution. The success of this individual relationship would significantly influence the overall family's ability to function collaboratively during their financial restructuring process. Victoria's preparation extended beyond communications strategy development to include comprehensive legal and regulatory compliance planning that would ensure her family assistance activities met all fiduciary standards and institutional requirements. Her consultation with specialized attorneys confirmed that transparent disclosure of her institutional roles and potential conflicts of interest would actually strengthen her position with banking regulators, while providing family members with complete information necessary for informed decision-making regarding her proposed assistance. The technical aspects of the financial restructuring proposals required extensive refinement to ensure they could be implemented within the compressed timeline dictated by regulatory examination schedules and market conditions affecting the family's various investment positions. Victoria worked closely with her institutional management team to develop specific procedures for handling related party transactions that would satisfy both family needs and regulatory expectations, while maintaining appropriate documentation and oversight mechanisms. Victoria's learning process during this intensive preparation period revealed capabilities she had not previously recognized within herself, particularly in areas of crisis leadership and stakeholder management under extreme pressure. Her business experience had involved managing complex financial institutions and investment portfolios, but had not required the psychological insight and interpersonal diplomacy necessary for navigating family conflicts, while maintaining focus on urgent practical objectives that could not be postponed for relationship healing. The development of presentation materials for the family disclosure required balancing technical accuracy with emotional accessibility, ensuring that complex financial concepts could be understood by family members with varying levels of business sophistication, while maintaining the analytical rigor necessary for informed decision-making. Victoria created multiple versions of each analysis, ranging from high-level summaries suitable for initial discussion to detailed technical documentation that could support implementation planning for family members who required comprehensive understanding of proposed strategies. Victoria's consultation with family business specialists provided valuable insights into the psychological dynamics that typically accompany revelations of hidden wealth or capabilities within established family systems. She learned that successful integration of previously unknown resources often required structured processes for acknowledging past misunderstandings, establishing new communication patterns, and developing collaborative decision-making procedures that honored existing relationships while incorporating expanded capabilities and responsibilities. The timeline pressures created by external regulatory and market forces required Victoria to accelerate her learning curve regarding family intervention strategies while simultaneously managing her existing business operations and maintaining the public appearances necessary to preserve family relationships during the transition period. Her ability to compartmentalize different aspects of her professional responsibilities while developing new competencies under pressure demonstrated executive capabilities that had been refined through years of managing complex high-stakes situations. Victoria's growing confidence in her ability to guide the family through their necessary transformation was supported by positive feedback from the professional advisors she had engaged to assist with various aspects of the disclosure and restructuring process. Legal counsel confirmed that her approach to regulatory compliance would satisfy institutional requirements while maximizing family flexibility. Financial consultants validated her restructuring proposals as both technically sound and strategically advantageous for all parties involved. Family business experts endorsed her communication strategy as appropriately sensitive to relationship dynamics, while maintaining focus on essential practical objectives. The most significant aspect of Victoria's learning process involved developing emotional resilience and leadership presence that would enable her to maintain composure and strategic focus despite the inevitable shock, anger, and resistance she would encounter from family members whose worldview would be fundamentally challenged by her revelations. She understood that her ability to remain calm and supportive while delivering information that would be emotionally disruptive would determine whether the family could successfully navigate their crisis or become paralyzed by interpersonal conflict. Victoria's preparation included extensive scenario planning for various possible reactions and combination of responses from different family members, with contingency strategies designed to address the most challenging potential outcomes while maintaining progress toward essential financial objectives. She developed specific responses to likely accusations of manipulation, deception, and betrayal that would acknowledge legitimate concerns while redirecting focus toward collaborative problem-solving and future relationship building. The technical complexity of coordinating simultaneous disclosure to multiple family members while managing their individual adjustment processes required project management capabilities that Victoria had not previously applied to personal relationships. She created detailed timelines, communication protocols, and documentation procedures that would ensure all family members received consistent information while providing appropriate opportunities for private discussion and individual consultation regarding their specific circumstances and concerns. Victoria's learning curve extended to developing new forms of empathy and emotional intelligence that would enable her to understand and respond effectively to family members' feelings of betrayal, inadequacy, and confusion upon learning that their assumptions about her capabilities had been fundamentally incorrect for nearly a decade. Her business experience had involved managing professional relationships where performance expectations and accountability structures provided clear frameworks for addressing misunderstandings and conflicts. Yet family relationships operated according to emotional and psychological principles that required entirely different approaches to conflict resolution and relationship repair. The most challenging aspect of Victoria's preparation involved accepting that her revelation would inevitably alter every relationship within the extended family system, regardless of how skillfully she managed the disclosure process, or how beneficial the practical outcomes might be for all parties involved. She learned to view these relationship changes as necessary evolution rather than regrettable damage, understanding that authentic partnership based on honest recognition of capabilities would ultimately prove more satisfying and sustainable than comfortable arrangements based on misconceptions and limited expectations. Victoria's consultation with experts in family wealth transition provided historical perspective on similar situations where family members had discovered hidden capabilities or resources among relatives they had previously underestimated. These case studies demonstrated that successful integration of expanded capabilities typically required several months of adjustment and relationship renegotiation, but could ultimately strengthen family bonds through increased respect, improved communication, and more effective collaboration in addressing shared objectives. The development of Victoria's leadership capabilities during this intensive preparation period represented personal growth that extended far beyond the immediate requirements of family crisis management. She discovered strengths in areas of interpersonal communication, conflict resolution, and stakeholder alignment that complemented her existing expertise in financial analysis and institutional management. These expanded capabilities would serve her well not only during the immediate family transformation process, but also in her future role as recognized leader within their extended social and professional networks. Victoria's recognition that she was developing competencies that had not been required during her years of anonymous business success reinforced her understanding that true leadership often demanded personal vulnerability and emotional risk-taking that differed significantly from the analytical decision-making and strategic planning that characterized most professional activities. Her willingness to expose herself to potential rejection and relationship damage in service of family welfare demonstrated character development that transcended purely business considerations. The completion of Victoria's preparation phase marked her readiness to proceed with the comprehensive family disclosure that would determine whether the Ashford family could successfully transform their financial difficulties into opportunities for strengthened relationships and improved long-term security. Her intensive learning process had equipped her with the knowledge, skills, and emotional preparation necessary to guide her family through one of the most challenging periods in their collective history, while her systematic approach to planning and preparation reflected the disciplined excellence that had characterized all her professional endeavors. The candlelight flickered across the assembled faces of the Ashford family as they gathered for their monthly investment dinner at the Union Club, unaware that this evening would mark the end of 8 years of carefully maintained illusions about Victoria's role within their financial ecosystem. The familiar ritual of reviewing portfolio performance and discussing market opportunities proceeded according to established patterns, yet Victoria understood that the comfortable dynamics governing these interactions would be permanently altered within the next 2 hours. Victoria had chosen this setting for her comprehensive revelation based on strategic considerations that extended beyond simple convenience or tradition. The formal environment of the club's private dining room would encourage rational discussion and professional behavior, while minimizing the emotional volatility that might accompany such dramatic disclosures in more intimate settings. The presence of all family members simultaneously would ensure consistent information delivery while preventing the distortions and misunderstandings that could result from sequential individual conversations. The evening began with Richard Ashford's customary presentation of market analysis and investment recommendations, delivered with the confident authority that had established his reputation as the family's financial patriarch over the course of 3 decades. Victoria listened attentively while privately evaluating his insights through the comprehensive analytical framework she had developed during her years of institutional management and international investment activities. The gaps and limitations in his analysis were apparent to her trained perspective, yet she maintained the polite interest expected from someone whose understanding of such matters was presumed to be superficial. Marcus Ashford's presentation of his current development project followed the familiar pattern of optimistic projections and enthusiastic marketing rhetoric that had characterized his business communications throughout Victoria's experience with the family. His discussion of construction timelines, market absorption rates, and financing arrangements revealed the same analytical weaknesses that Victoria had identified through her review of his loan documentation at Metropolitan Trust Bank. The disconnect between his public confidence and the reality of his financial vulnerability created tension that Victoria knew she would need to address before his situation deteriorated beyond recovery. Catherine Ashford's quarterly report on her boutique investment fund provided the most dramatic illustration of the family's financial challenges and their inability to recognize the resources available to address these difficulties through Victoria's expertise and institutional capabilities. The fund's continued losses and Catherine's inadequate responses to deteriorating performance demonstrated the urgent need for professional intervention that could only be provided through honest acknowledgement of Victoria's background and current business operations. Victoria's observation of the family's discussions throughout the dinner confirmed her analysis that their financial difficulties had reached critical levels requiring immediate coordinated response rather than continued individual efforts that failed to address underlying strategic and operational problems. The interconnected nature of their obligations and the cascading risks created by their various business activities demanded comprehensive restructuring that could only be achieved through resources and expertise that she uniquely possessed within their extended network. The moment for revelation arrived as the family concluded their formal presentations and transitioned toward the social conversation that typically accompanied dessert and coffee service. Victoria's request to address the group created mild curiosity rather than concern, since her occasional comments during these gatherings had never challenged existing assumptions or introduced complex business concepts that required serious analytical consideration. Victoria began her disclosure with carefully chosen words that acknowledged the unprecedented nature of her presentation, while establishing the urgent practical necessities that had compelled her to abandon the comfortable anonymity she had maintained throughout her marriage to Jonathan. Her explanation of regulatory pressures and institutional requirements provided external validation for her decision, while minimizing the appearance of personal dissatisfaction with existing family dynamics. The initial revelation of Victoria's educational credentials generated expressions of surprise and confusion, rather than the immediate resistance she had anticipated based on her scenario planning. The documentation she presented included official transcripts from Harvard Business School and the London School of Economics, professional certifications from recognized industry organizations, and recommendation letters from former supervisors and colleagues that provided third-party validation of her expertise and accomplishments. Richard Ashford's reaction to learning about Victoria's advanced degrees in economics and quantitative finance reflected the complex mixture of surprise, skepticism, and defensive pride that Victoria had expected from someone whose authority and expertise had been unquestioned within the family structure for many years. His initial questions focused on why she had concealed such impressive credentials, rather than the practical implications of her background for addressing current family challenges. Marcus Ashford's response demonstrated greater curiosity about Victoria's previous career experience and the potential relevance of her expertise to contemporary business challenges facing the family. His professional background in real estate development had provided him with exposure to complex financial structures and institutional relationships that helped him appreciate the significance of Victoria's credentials and international experience. Catherine Ashford's reaction proved most complex and emotionally charged, combining shock at discovering Victoria's superior educational background with defensive concern about the implications for her own role as the family's recognized investment specialist. Her questions revealed underlying insecurity about her professional competence that Victoria had not fully anticipated, despite her careful analysis of family personality dynamics. Jonathan served as advocate and translator during the initial phase of the disclosure process, providing context for Victoria's decision to maintain professional anonymity, while emphasizing her commitment to family welfare and relationship preservation. His support helped establish credibility for her subsequent revelations, while demonstrating that their marital relationship had successfully navigated the challenges associated with her concealed identity. Victoria's presentation of her investment activities during their marriage required extensive explanation to help family members understand the scope and sophistication of her business operations, while maintaining focus on her protective motivations, rather than personal financial advancement. She emphasized that her decision to pursue independent investment activities had been motivated by intellectual stimulation and preparation for potential family financial challenges, rather than dissatisfaction with her domestic role or desire for personal recognition. The revelation of Victoria's international investment portfolio generated questions about the resources and expertise she had access to through her various business relationships. Family members began to recognize that her quiet demeanor during their previous financial discussions had concealed extensive knowledge and capabilities that could have enhanced their decision-making and problem-solving activities. Victoria's disclosure of her ownership stake in Metropolitan Trust Bank created the most dramatic reaction from the assembled family members. The realization that their mortgages, construction loans, and other financial obligations were held by an institution controlled by the woman they had dismissed as financially naive generated immediate understanding of how fundamentally their assumptions about family dynamics and power structures had been incorrect. Richard Ashford's initial reaction to learning about Victoria's institutional control focused on concerns about potential conflicts of interest and the ethics of her concealed involvement in family financial relationships. Victoria addressed these concerns through detailed explanation of her consultation with specialized legal counsel and her commitment to transparent compliance with all regulatory requirements governing related party transactions. Marcus Ashford's response reflected his growing recognition that Victoria's position as institutional controller provided her with intimate knowledge of his development projects and financial performance that extended far beyond what he had shared during family discussions. His initial embarrassment about the transparency of his business operations to someone he had never regarded as professionally sophisticated gradually transformed into appreciation for the discretion she had maintained regarding his challenges. Catherine Ashford's reaction to learning about Victoria's bank ownership represented the most emotionally challenging aspect of the evening's revelations. Her recognition that someone she had consistently dismissed as intellectually inferior actually controlled financial resources that dwarfed her own professional accomplishments, created cognitive dissonance that required careful navigation to prevent lasting relationship damage. Victoria's presentation of specific solutions to each family member's current financial challenges demonstrated the practical benefits that her revelation could generate for all parties involved. Her comprehensive restructuring proposals address not only immediate crisis resolution but also long-term improvements in their collective approach to risk management and investment coordination. The technical sophistication of Victoria's analytical work and strategic recommendations provided concrete evidence of her professional capabilities while offering hope for recovery from their current difficulties. Family members began to recognize that her unique combination of expertise, resources, and institutional access represented opportunities for financial improvement that would not be available through conventional consulting relationships. Victoria's emphasis on collaboration rather than control helped family members understand that her revelation was intended to expand their collective capabilities rather than diminish their individual contributions. She presented herself as additional resource and advisor rather than replacement for their existing expertise and decision-making authority. The evening's conclusion marked successful completion of Victoria's first major test in managing family transformation under pressure while maintaining focus on essential practical objectives. Her ability to navigate complex emotional reactions while delivering comprehensive solutions demonstrated leadership capabilities that exceeded her own expectations and established credibility for future collaborative relationships. The family's gradual acceptance of Victoria's expanded role reflected their recognition that her revelation offered solutions to problems that had seemed intractable through their previous approaches. Their willingness to consider fundamental changes in family dynamics demonstrated the same adaptability and pragmatism that had contributed to their business success over many years. Victoria's success in maintaining composure and strategic focus despite emotional volatility and relationship challenges validated her intensive preparation and confirmed her readiness to assume visible leadership roles within both family and institutional contexts. The evening represented not only successful disclosure of her concealed identity but also demonstration of the leadership presence that would be essential for guiding complex organizational and relationship transformations. The positive outcome of this critical test provided Victoria with confidence that her carefully developed capabilities could indeed serve the protective and advancement purposes that had motivated her years of hidden preparation and empire building. Her transition from invisible observer to recognized leader had begun successfully, establishing the foundation for more comprehensive transformation of both family relationships and business operations. The transformation in family dynamics became immediately apparent during the days following Victoria's comprehensive revelation at the Union Club. The carefully constructed hierarchy that had governed Ashford family financial discussions for decades underwent fundamental restructuring as members gradually absorbed the implications of Victoria's professional credentials, business achievements, and institutional authority. The woman they had dismissed as an ornamental addition to family gatherings was now recognized as the most qualified and resourceful financial professional within their extended network. Victoria observed this recognition process with a mixture of satisfaction and careful attention to the psychological adjustments required from each family member. The shift from condescending dismissal to respectful acknowledgement did not occur uniformly across the group, requiring individualized management approaches that drew upon her growing expertise in stakeholder relations and organizational change dynamics. Her success in navigating these varied reactions would determine whether the family could achieve the collaborative partnership necessary for addressing their collective financial challenges effectively. Richard Ashford's adjustment to Victoria's revealed expertise represented perhaps the most significant challenge in terms of maintaining family unity while establishing appropriate professional recognition. His role as patriarchal financial authority had been central to his identity and family relationships for over 30 years, making acceptance of Victoria's superior credentials and resources particularly difficult from both personal and social perspectives. Victoria understood that his cooperation would be essential for successful implementation of the restructuring strategies she had developed, yet demanding such cooperation without providing face-saving opportunities could generate permanent resentment that would undermine long-term family relationships. Victoria's approach to managing Richard's transition involved careful emphasis on complementary expertise rather than competitive replacement of his established role within the family structure. She presented her institutional resources and international experience as additional capabilities that could enhance his investment strategies rather than corrections to fundamental flaws in his analytical approach. This collaborative positioning allowed Richard to maintain his sense of professional competence while acknowledging the practical benefits that Victoria's expanded involvement could provide for family financial security. The specific areas where Victoria's expertise most clearly exceeded Richard's capabilities were addressed through private consultation sessions that allowed him to learn from her insights without public admission of knowledge gaps that might diminish his standing within the family hierarchy. Victoria provided detailed analyses of emerging market trends, regulatory developments, and institutional opportunities that were not available through Richard's traditional information sources, presenting this intelligence as supplementary research rather than corrective instruction. Richard's gradual recognition of Victoria's analytical sophistication occurred through direct experience with her strategic recommendations and their practical implementation results. Her ability to identify profitable investment opportunities that he had overlooked, combined with her access to institutional relationships that could enhance portfolio performance, provided concrete evidence of capabilities that transcended theoretical credentials or academic achievements. The measurable improvements in family investment returns that resulted from incorporating her insights established credibility that could not be dismissed or minimized through defensive rationalization. Marcus Ashford's acceptance of Victoria's expertise proceeded more smoothly due to his professional exposure to complex financial structures through his real estate development activities. His business experience had provided him with frameworks for evaluating financial expertise that made Victoria's credentials and institutional resources more readily comprehensible than they appeared to other family members with less specialized backgrounds. Additionally, his current financial difficulties created immediate incentives for accepting assistance from any qualified source, regardless of previous assumptions about family member capabilities. Victoria's knowledge of Marcus's development projects through her bank's lending activities initially created embarrassment and concern about privacy violations, yet her professional discretion and constructive approach to addressing his challenges gradually transformed these concerns into appreciation for her protective involvement. Her detailed understanding of construction financing requirements, regulatory compliance issues, and market conditions affecting his projects demonstrated expertise that could significantly enhance his business prospects if properly utilized through collaborative partnership. The restructuring proposals Victoria developed for Marcus's development portfolio addressed both immediate financing needs and long-term strategic improvements in his approach to project selection, risk assessment, and capital structure optimization. Her recommendations incorporated insights derived from her analysis of successful development projects financed through Metropolitan Trust Bank, providing Marcus with access to institutional knowledge that was not available through conventional consulting relationships. Marcus's recognition of Victoria's value as business advisor and financial partner occurred through implementation of specific recommendations that generated measurable improvements in project performance and profitability. Her ability to facilitate regulatory approvals, optimize financing terms, and provide market intelligence that enhanced marketing strategies demonstrated practical competence that validated her theoretical knowledge and credentials. Catherine Ashford's adjustment to Victoria's revealed expertise proved most psychologically complex due to direct competition in areas where Catherine had established her professional identity and family role. The discovery that Victoria possessed superior credentials in investment management, combined with resources that dwarfed Catherine's boutique fund operations, created cognitive dissonance that required extensive emotional processing before productive collaboration could be achieved. Victoria's approach to managing Catherine's transition emphasized mentorship and knowledge transfer rather than replacement or criticism of existing investment strategies. She presented her willingness to share analytical tools, market intelligence, and institutional relationships as opportunities for Catherine to enhance her professional capabilities rather than evidence of fundamental inadequacies in her current approach to investment management. The specific areas where Victoria's expertise could most benefit Catherine's fund operations were addressed through collaborative analysis sessions that allowed Catherine to contribute her own insights while learning from Victoria's more sophisticated analytical frameworks and risk management techniques. This partnership approach preserved Catherine's sense of professional competence while providing access to resources that could transform her fund's performance from consistent losses to sustainable profitability. Catherine's recognition of Victoria's value as professional partner occurred gradually as she observed the practical benefits of incorporating more sophisticated analytical methods and risk management practices into her investment processes. The improvements in fund performance that resulted from implementing Victoria's recommendations provided concrete validation of her expertise, while offering hope for recovery from the devastating losses that had threatened Catherine's professional reputation and financial security. Victoria's management of the recognition process extended beyond individual relationship building to encompass systematic changes in family communication patterns and decision-making procedures that would accommodate her expanded role while preserving existing relationships and social dynamics. She understood that successful integration of her capabilities required institutional changes that would provide appropriate forums for her input while maintaining respect for family members, established areas of expertise and authority. The development of new family meeting structures that incorporated Victoria's analytical capabilities while preserving existing relationship dynamics required careful attention to psychological and social factors that influenced individual comfort levels with changed circumstances. Victoria designed consultation procedures that allowed family members to access her expertise and resources without public acknowledgement of dependence that might generate embarrassment or resentment. Victoria's establishment of private advisory relationships with each family member provided opportunities for individualized assistance that addressed specific needs and challenges while maintaining appropriate confidentiality regarding personal financial circumstances and business difficulties. These individual consultation arrangements allowed family members to benefit from her expertise without concern about competitive dynamics or social pressure that might accompany group discussions of sensitive financial topics. The recognition of Victoria's institutional authority occurred through practical experience with her ability to influence outcomes that mattered to family members, financial security, and business success. Her capacity to facilitate loan approvals, optimize financing terms, and provide access to investment opportunities that were not available through conventional channels demonstrated power and influence that transcended theoretical credentials or academic achievements. Victoria's careful exercise of her institutional authority emphasized family benefit rather than personal aggrandizement, ensuring that recognition of her capabilities was accompanied by trust in her motivations and commitment to collective welfare. Her transparent approach to potential conflicts of interest and her consistent prioritization of family needs over institutional profits established credibility that supported long-term collaborative relationships. The broader implications of Victoria's recognition within the family structure extended beyond immediate financial crisis resolution to encompass fundamental changes in social dynamics and relationship patterns that had governed family interactions for decades. The acknowledgement of her expertise and authority required adjustments in established hierarchies and communication patterns that affected all aspects of family relationships, rather than simply financial decision-making processes. Victoria's successful navigation of the recognition process demonstrated leadership capabilities that extended far beyond technical financial expertise to encompass psychological insight, interpersonal diplomacy, and strategic communication skills that enabled productive collaboration among individuals with diverse personalities and competing interests. Her ability to maintain family unity while establishing appropriate professional recognition represented personal growth that prepared her for broader leadership roles within her social and professional networks. The positive outcomes generated through Victoria's expanded involvement in family financial affairs provided concrete evidence of the benefits that could result from honest acknowledgement of capabilities and resources that had been concealed or underutilized due to social assumptions and relationship constraints. The family's collective financial position began showing measurable improvements that validated Victoria's strategic recommendations while demonstrating the practical value of her expertise and institutional resources. Victoria's recognition as legitimate financial authority within the Ashford family marked completion of her transformation from invisible observer to acknowledged leader, establishing the foundation for more comprehensive changes in both family dynamics and business operations that would define their relationships for decades to come. Victoria's successful establishment of professional recognition within the Ashford family structure created immediate opportunities for expanded influence that extended far beyond their private financial affairs into the broader social and institutional networks that defined Boston's financial establishment. The revelation of her credentials and business achievements had generated interest from professional colleagues, social acquaintances, and institutional partners who had previously regarded her as merely a decorative addition to Jonathan's social presence. These external recognition patterns created both opportunities for greater impact and increased pressures that would test her readiness for public leadership roles. The first indication of elevated expectations occurred during a charitable fundraising gala, where Victoria encountered Margaret Whitmore, the president of the New England Women's Financial Network, an influential organization that connected female executives across banking, investment management, and corporate finance sectors throughout the region. Margaret's approach to Victoria reflected sophisticated intelligence gathering about her recently revealed professional background and business holdings, suggesting that news of her disclosure to the Ashford family had circulated beyond their immediate social circle into the broader professional community that monitored significant developments in regional financial markets. Margaret's invitation for Victoria to address the organization's quarterly meeting represented both validation of her professional standing and introduction of responsibilities that would require public visibility and accountability that differed substantially from the discreet influence she had exercised through her years of anonymous business operations. The prospect of speaking before accomplished financial professionals, who would evaluate her expertise against the highest industry standards, created intellectual excitement, alongside recognition that her comfortable anonymity was ending irreversibly. Victoria's consideration of this speaking opportunity revealed the extent to which her circumstances had evolved, from personal crisis management to institutional leadership, that could influence professional development and business outcomes for dozens of accomplished women facing similar challenges in establishing recognition within male-dominated financial environments. Her potential contributions to this community extended beyond simple knowledge sharing to encompass mentorship and advocacy that could create lasting positive change in regional business culture and practices. The preparation required for addressing professional colleagues demanded different capabilities than those Victoria had employed in managing family transformation, requiring translation of her institutional experience into educational content that could benefit professionals with diverse backgrounds and varying levels of expertise in international finance and complex business structures. Her presentation development process became an exercise in strategic communication that would serve as template for future professional speaking and consultation activities. Victoria's analysis of her potential impact within regional financial networks revealed opportunities to influence lending practices, investment strategies, and business development approaches that could benefit hundreds of businesses and thousands of individual borrowers throughout New England. Her unique perspective as both institutional controller and individual entrepreneur provided insights into systemic problems and potential solutions that were not apparent to professionals who operated exclusively within traditional organizational hierarchies. The realization that her expertise and resources could address market failures and institutional limitations beyond her immediate family circumstances created moral obligations and professional responsibilities that demanded careful consideration. Victoria understood that significant capability carried corresponding duty to contribute toward improved outcomes for stakeholders who could benefit from her knowledge and institutional access, yet accepting such responsibilities would require fundamental changes in her lifestyle and personal priorities. Victoria's evaluation of expanded professional commitments was complicated by simultaneous developments in her family restructuring activities that required sustained attention and careful management to ensure successful implementation. The Ashford family's financial recovery remained fragile and dependent upon continued coordination and oversight that could not be delegated to external professionals without compromising the personalized attention that had made their initial progress possible. Marcus Ashford's development projects were showing measurable improvement under Victoria's strategic guidance, yet remained vulnerable to market conditions and regulatory changes that required ongoing monitoring and adjustment to maintain positive trajectory toward profitability and debt reduction. His growing confidence in his business capabilities was encouraging, but needed continued reinforcement through successful project completions and expanded professional relationships that Victoria could facilitate through her institutional network. Catherine Ashford's investment fund had achieved stabilization and modest growth through implementation of Victoria's risk management recommendations and analytical frameworks, yet required additional time and support to establish the consistent performance record necessary for attracting new investors and rebuilding professional reputation within the broader investment community. Victoria's mentorship relationship with Catherine had evolved into productive collaboration but remained essential for continued improvement in fund operations and strategic positioning. Richard Ashford's investment portfolio had benefited significantly from access to Victoria's market intelligence and institutional opportunities, generating returns that exceeded his historical performance while reducing overall risk exposure through improved diversification and strategic asset allocation. His acceptance of Victoria's advisory role had strengthened their family relationship while providing him with resources that enhanced his reputation within his own professional network. The collective success of these family interventions had created expectations for similar assistance from extended family members, close friends, and professional associates who had observed the dramatic improvements in Ashford family financial circumstances and business performance. These informal consultation requests represented both validation of Victoria's expertise and indication that her influence would inevitably expand beyond their immediate family structure into broader social and professional networks. Victoria's consideration of these expanding demands for her attention and expertise required strategic evaluation of her capacity to manage multiple complex relationships while maintaining the quality of service and personal attention that had characterized her family interventions. The scalability of her advisory and institutional resources became a crucial factor in determining appropriate scope for her expanded professional activities. The development of systematic approaches to consultation and advisory services required Victoria to create organizational structures and operational procedures that could accommodate growing demand while preserving the personalized attention and strategic focus that distinguished her assistance from conventional financial advisory services. Her consideration of these operational challenges revealed the need for careful balance between accessibility and exclusivity that would maintain the quality and effectiveness of her interventions. Victoria's analysis of market demand for her unique combination of institutional resources and personalized advisory services revealed significant opportunities for business development that could generate substantial revenue while providing meaningful assistance to underserved market segments. Small business owners, individual entrepreneurs, and family-controlled enterprises often struggled to access the sophisticated financial expertise and institutional relationships that Victoria could provide through structured consultation arrangements. The prospect of formalizing her advisory activities into organized business operations created both excitement about professional fulfillment and concern about maintaining the flexibility and personal focus that had made her family interventions successful. Victoria understood that institutionalizing her services could provide greater impact and sustainability, yet might compromise the intimate understanding and customized solutions that had characterized her most effective work. Victoria's evaluation of these expansion opportunities was influenced by recognition that her unique position as both institutional controller and individual advisor provided competitive advantages that could benefit clients in ways that conventional service providers could not match. Her ability to facilitate financing, provide market intelligence, and coordinate complex transactions through her institutional network represented capabilities that were not available through traditional consulting relationships. The increasing complexity of demands upon Victoria's time and expertise required development of prioritization frameworks that could guide her decision-making regarding which opportunities to pursue and which requests to decline or refer to other professionals. Her commitment to family welfare remained primary consideration, yet growing recognition of her broader potential contributions created obligations that extended beyond personal and familial concerns. Victoria's contemplation of these expanded responsibilities revealed the extent to which successful professional development had transformed her from someone seeking recognition into someone bearing responsibility for utilizing recognition in service of others who could benefit from her expertise and resources. The transition from private capability to public leadership represented personal growth that would define her professional identity and social contributions for decades to come. The rising stakes associated with Victoria's expanded visibility and influence demanded corresponding increases in her professional standards, operational sophistication, and strategic planning capabilities that would ensure her continued effectiveness while protecting her reputation and family relationships from potential negative consequences of public prominence. Her success in managing these elevated expectations would determine whether her transformation from anonymous observer to recognized leader could sustain long-term positive impact for all stakeholders involved in her expanding professional network. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.